Billionaire activist Tom Steyer is officially running for president. This week, he became the 25th Democrat vying for the nomination after initially saying that he would not run.
Earlier, we spoke to Steyer about how he would address some of the nation's biggest issues like immigration, reparations, and health care.
The first thing I'd say about immigration is this. We need to separate it into the 11 million people who've been here and part of society for a long time and get comprehensive immigration reform to put them on a path to citizenship. We keep confusing the people who are coming with the people who've been here for a long time.
So even if you've been here and you're undocumented or illegal, as people say, they need a pathway to citizenship.
Absolutely. I mean, we need to get past that. And then we need to ask ourselves, what is our responsibility? What do we want in terms of immigration? It's as if we're this passive thing with no intention. We need immigrants. For this society to flourish, we need new people to come. Mm-hmm. And we have never asked ourselves, what are we looking for? Not who wants to come, but who do we want to encourage to come? How do we make our society stronger? And then we have to ask ourselves, what is our responsibility to the people who are just showing up? We've never, it's really funny because in a lot of politics, you never hear people take a step back and say, why do we have this huge defense budget? What is the point? What are we trying to accomplish? And I'd say the exact same thing in immigration. It's at least two gigantic questions, neither of which is being addressed. If you want to see failed government, look at immigration. With every single question is a tactical, short-term question run for political reasons, as opposed to having any kind of idea of what we're trying to accomplish over the long term. I mean, it really is a failed system. And for us not to have had comprehensive immigration reform for decades shows how broken Washington really is. Mm-hmm.
You've obviously, no doubt, seen that this field of candidates running for the presidency is the most diverse in history in terms of, gender, and we have a gay man running, we have people of color. What would you, and even as we've made great strides in 2019, African Americans still lag in a number of ways, whether it's in education, whether it's in job growth, whether it's in wages. What's your approach to garnering the African American vote, given that a lot of African Americans say the system as it is hasn't worked for us?
So what you're saying is that African Americans are saying exactly what I've been saying, which is the system is broken and is responding to something different, to corporate needs, as opposed to our needs and the needs of the people. So I think there's first thing to say about race is we have to address it straightforwardly and verbally all the time. You can't look at inequality in America without dealing with race and ethnicity openly and throughout the question. Because as you say, you can look at the results and see they're absolutely unfair. And I think that it's a systemic approach, including, of course, education, but also including the idea that there has been injustice for centuries that we need to redress, and we have to deal with it openly and overtly and talk about it so that people can get a completely different understanding of what's happened and the contributions and leadership that the African American community.
Are you talking about reparations?
Well, that was a question that I was asked earlier today by your coworkers, colleagues, yes. And I was saying, look, there's no question that there has been injustice. There is no question that we should be addressing it. And the only question is, which is yours, let's have the conversation in public about what's happened, and let's have a conversation in public about the best way to deal with that and undo the injustice.
So would you, for example, do you support the Black Lives Matter movement? Do you support
yes.
do you support the legalization of marijuana?
Of course.
You do?
I'm from California. Good grief, you guys. It's legal in California. I'm not a pot smoker,
right.
but that's one of those things where you can look at it and say, the entire Reagan just say no to pot, that wasn't working.
Yeah. Well, a lot of also people have argued that, this is what's led to the explosion in prison populations, and that is severe.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Look, we criminalized something and then enforced the law differentially by race, so that the same drug offenses in the African American community were treated differently and much more severely. And so when you look at the explosion since 1980 of the prison population, it's absolutely focused. I mean, it was an absolute attempt to incarcerate African Americans at a historic, unprecedented, crazy rate with terrible results for those people, those communities, and our country.
You become president. What's your first executive order?
I have that answer, but we're going to roll it out in a little while. I'm not going to.
Okay, then let me ask you something else.
It's not a secret, but let me give us a chance to talk about certain things in order.
Okay, then let me ask you about health care. Right, this president campaigned on repeal and replace, but it turned out to be not so easy. And now we're in sort of this no man's land where we really don't know what the end product is going to look like. But he's managed to dismantle some components of the Affordable Care Act.
He doesn't have an end product. Let's be reasonable. This guy does not have a plan.
What would you do?
Look,
what would you like to see?
Let me make 2 points about health care. And I'm going to answer your question, but the first point I want to make is this.
Because, many people, though the Affordable Care Act worked for many people, there were some things wrong. It was incredibly expensive for a lot of people.
Look, what we're seeing, the healthcare crisis is really a healthcare cost crisis and a healthcare availability crisis. That's really what's hitting America. And so let's start with the idea that healthcare is a right, and there should be a government option for every single person in this society. Should be much cheaper because it is everywhere else in the world. It's half as expensive. And I believe that the government option should drive down prices and should make the private healthcare systems obsolete over time. But let me also point out, this is my point about this election. People are talking about the nuances of healthcare policy, none of which is going to happen. The question is, how are we actually going to break the stranglehold that corporations have? Healthcare corporations, drug companies, the big HMOs, how are we going to break that stranglehold? Because otherwise, it's an interesting question, and we should go off to some university and have the debate, but it's not going to happen. And the real question here is, how are any of those policies going to get done? Because right now, they're just a nice theory with magical thinking about how it's going to happen.
Like single payer, that's like leprechaun stuff?
Look, in order to get it done, go look and see what it will actually take. My point here is, unless we return power to the people and break this stranglehold of the corporations, it's not going to happen.